You've also thought about signing up for the Biodiversity Conservation Trust as well. A record 91,000 hectares of farmland signed up to the trust this year. 0467 922 684. That's the number to text me here at the Country Hour. We'll start with that story because farmers are doing their bit to help the environment. 91,000 hectares signed up last year. It's a record to the Biodiversity Conservation Trust. Essentially, the trust paying farmers to protect endangered plants and animals. In total, since its inception, the trust has 450 farmers involved in protecting biodiversity. Erin Giuliani is the CEO of the New South Wales Biodiversity Conservation Trust. She says this year farmers are so keen to sign up the tenders that they've actually been oversubscribed, and they're seeing an increase in farmer numbers as a result.
We are, Michael. We're seeing an increase year on year, and as you will have read, last year was a great year for the Biodiversity Conservation Trust. We signed up a number of new landholders to funded agreements, and in total, as is indicated, around 91,000 hectares protected for the biodiversity value on that land, and we're expecting that to continue this financial year. And we have a number of agreements, as it were, in the pipeline, as you could say. So definitely, and if I think about our programs, when our teams out there in the regions, our local landholder support officers are out there with a particular offer or tender in a region, we're definitely seeing oversubscription of our programs, which is excellent to see. So the demand is certainly there, and the interest levels are there, and landholders are certainly really keen to work with the Biodiversity Conservation Trust to protect important biodiversity on their land.
Yeah, that's right. There does seem to be a willingness to get involved because farmers, they say they do a lot of this preservation of important native species anyway, and why shouldn't they get paid for it?
Yes, that's exactly right. And there are, as I said, the demand's really high, and there's definitely landholders out there who are already doing this work, and through a competitive tender that the BCT might run, there are people who inevitably miss out as well. So there is certainly a great deal of interest in protecting, endangered species on private land, and we've got some fantastic land stewards out there in the regions. And if listeners are interested, our website does detail some really nice case studies as well, showing how farmers and landholders are balancing their agricultural efforts as well as their conservation efforts on their land.
Are we talking about just plant species, or are we talking about flora and fauna? And what sorts of critical things are you trying to preserve?
Yeah, look, we're talking about both, really. So over the coming period, we'll be running a tender that looks at protecting threatened ecological grassy communities in the southeast. So that one's coming up in this financial year, and we have in the past run tenders that have been focused on protecting important koala habitat in the northern inland. We've also
on private farms.
We've also recently in the Murray Riverina looked at an offer that's focused on remnant woodlands and restoration. And in the Lower Clarence Valley, we ran a successful offer that's focused on native coastal floodplain. Last year we completed some work in the Darling River, and that one's just coming to finalisation now, and that was focused on protecting critical wetlands and vegetation communities of high conservation value. But those areas provide important habitat for migratory birds and can be seen as drought refuge to threatened species such as pink cockatoos and Australian bustards, and it's also home to threatened ecological communities like the Coolabah black box woodland. So, you get a sense that it's both flora and fauna, and protecting those habitats sometimes is critical for, migratory birds as well as fauna that's there on people's farms and private land.
91,000 hectares. I mean, that number would be dwarfed by the amount of land that's under national parks throughout New South Wales. Why is it better to preserve these things on farm than, say, setting up a national park? I mean, what's the rationale there?
Yeah, look, not necessarily better. You know, we would say that protecting biodiversity on private land complements the park estate. Why it's important, I suppose, is 70% of New South Wales is in private hands, and so New South Wales government recognised that, you know, to make a meaningful impact on protecting biodiversity in New South Wales, the key is also on private land as well. So 91,000 hectares in 1 year is a fantastic effort. There's more to do, and that's why we're really pleased that the Biodiversity Conservation Trust is funded to continue into the future.
Yeah, and when does the money run out? I mean, how many hectares would you have under the trust? You know, as a maximum. You know, when do you run out of money?
Yeah, look, we wouldn't set a maximum necessarily, but since we came into fruition in 2017. We've roughly added 250,000 hectares to the private land conservation estate.
So 91,000 in a year, that's a big increase.
That's a big increase, and of that amount that I just quoted, roughly 200,000 has been added in perpetuity, so agreements that are secured on title on the land forever. In terms of the funding, we're funded by the New South Wales government to 2030, and we would hope that funding would extend beyond that time frame. So a really important reform of the New South Wales government was to invest in private land conservation, and since that investment, we can confidently say that the Biodiversity Conservation Trust has been meeting and exceeding its targets. And we've got a 4-year business plan that we're roughly halfway through, and that 4-year plan set us a target to achieve roughly another 200,000 hectares. We're well on track for that. So, yeah, looking forward to continuing the growth that we're seeing, and that's contingent on that interest that you described earlier, Michael, from landholders themselves who may be already doing this work and are interested to sign up to the trust as a means to supporting that work with a funded agreement.
And roughly how many farmers are we talking about involved in total?
In total, we have roughly 450 landholders that have entered into an agreement with the Biodiversity Trust since 2017. However, landholders have been doing this work, and under previous legislation, there were agreements already signed up to by landholders. So in total, there's roughly 2,000 agreements. But the Biodiversity Conservation Trust came into fruition, as I said, in 2017, and we've added around 450 landholders to that cohort of people who are doing excellent work out there on their own property.
Erin Giuliani, CEO of New South Wales Biodiversity.